From Relay FM, this is Connected, episode 125. Today's show is brought to you by Eero, Incapsula, and Blue Apron. My name is Myke Hurley, and I am joined by Mr. Stephen Hackett.
Hola.
And we have a special guest today, Mr. Dan Moren. Hi, Dan, how are you?
Buongiorno.
Oh,
that's the best attempt I have at filling in for Federico here. So it's all going to be downhill from there. But thanks so much for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
You may know Dan Moren as the man Dan Moran, as we call him on this show. Dan is what were you like, a senior contributor to Six Colors? Do you have a title at Six Colors?
I don't know. You should ask Jason. I just keep making up better things. I'm going for Supreme Allied Commander is my new goal for titles.
Or just the official Dan at Six Colors.
There we go. Yeah, not like those off-brand Dans you get. None of that.
And Dan also hosts a selection of podcasts, including Clockwise on Relay FM.
It's good. It's a good show. You should listen if you don't. I mean, you're here on Relay already, so it's just it's like alphabetically next to Connected too. So
it is.
Just hit it by accident.
You'll be fine, and you will enjoy it too. It's got Jason Snell on it as well. If you like Jason Snell, then you'll like that show. But really, you should be listening for Dan. I mean, everybody
that's
does.
True. Yeah, thank you. That's true.
It's true. So we have some follow-up this week about microblogging. So we spoke last time about micro.blog by Matt and Reese. We're going to get to that, but first, in the news this week was a blog post from the folks over at app.net, which you may remember was a social media platform, I guess, that spun up several years ago. And I guess like a year and a half ago, they went into what they're calling maintenance mode, where all the services still worked, but they weren't going to be improving it anymore. And now that time has come to an end, and app.net is shutting down and going away. They do have a way to export your data, which I did, but it's all JSON files, so you have to know how to work with those. So I just have them sitting in my Dropbox for another day. But you can have all your stuff. You just have to figure out how to do it. It's not as nice as something like the Twitter archives, which if you've ever downloaded those, it's available to everybody. And it's basically like a mini website that you just run locally on your computer, and it's pretty nice. App.net just gives you kind of a data dump. And, it's not surprising, right? Maintenance mode started in 2014. It's surprising it's taken this long, but I thought it was interesting in light of the micro.blog conversation we've been having and the need to, potentially have something besides Twitter to put things, and especially having control of your data in more complete ways. That app.net, which was kind of to date the most successful run at that, has come to its end. So if you were a member, log in, get your stuff. I think that's worthwhile having, but it is going away.
I think I speak for all of us when I say that was still running.
Yeah, it's like 2014 all over again.
Yeah, it hurts.
I feel pretty strongly that I'm guessing my entire archive there is stuff like trying out app.net. Like, I think those can disappear into time. I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a different time, and I think even in the 3 years since it went to maintenance mode and now, I don't know if the time is right now for a Twitter alternative to like rise up and sort of take over, or at least in certain communities. But app.net, I think the timing just wasn't right. I think they had a lot of branding problems. I think it was confusing that they built something that was basically exactly like Twitter, and it was kind of hard to argue the case that it was better when it had fewer people and basically the same feature set. And that's kind of where we get to Manton Reese. So we spoke to Manton after the show last week, and he wrote a really nice email kind of walking through a little bit about what micro.blog is going to be, and I wanted to share that since last week there were some questions around it. And it's basically kind of his pitch is that it's a service that makes following what he calls microblogs easier, and it lets you host your content on the micro.blog platform. There'll be an iOS app. Or you can have an external website, so WordPress, Tumblr, anything that generates an RSS feed, and you can have it integrated into the timeline experience. So the way I kind of see this is, you can follow Relay FM or Six Colors or 512 Pixels or Mac Stories on Twitter, and you get that headline and the link, and it takes you off site. This is kind of a step beyond that, where if I were publishing short snippets, like short blog posts on 512 Pixels or on Tumblr or somewhere, you could read the entirety of that content kind of in your stream, in your timeline. And I think the idea here is that you can have one place to go to see an interesting mix of content. So you can see what people are saying, you can see what they're publishing elsewhere, kind of all in one environment. And it's even different from app.net, where you had to go and log into app.net's website or use an app.net client. Remember those? Like Felix was a real popular one, and Tapbots had
NetBot.
NetBot, yeah.
Which was a Tweetbot with a brown icon that connected to app.net for a while. I had those two side by side on my iPad. It was very confusing.
And
Repost. But you were feeding content into the app.net platform, and now that that's going away, you have to export that back out of their platform, and it may be in a format that some people can't utilize. Where with Maintenance System, I could have all of that content on a WordPress site, or I could have it on Tumblr. I could have it somewhere else. So if micro.blog, went away overnight, I still have all the stuff that I've written. And that's really the key difference. And the reason I think so many people have backed it, the Kickstarter is just out of control. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Tons of support, which is really great to see. But that's really the key difference, that I can have all this writing on my WordPress site, on a site that I have the keys to. So if micro.blog is away, my content doesn't go with it. Even this week in the news, Vine is shutting down. And I think maybe today is the last day you have to export your content from Vine. And a lot of services don't even offer that, right? A lot of services just disappear and your content goes with it. And if you ever wanted that stuff, it's kind of too late. So that's the big difference. And micro.blog that's kind of what it's built around. Maiten has, since last week, updated the Kickstarter project page twice. One with a little video of the iPhone app, kind of explaining how that works. And then one that I think is far more important, he published, I believe, yesterday, called talking about a new stretch goal and a new feature called Safe Replies. So the idea that if you reply to somebody who you don't have a following relationship with. So if somebody replies to me on Twitter that I don't follow, sometimes it's great, and I get, I hear from a lot of great people in that, but also if you tweet about healthcare, you get a lot of really ugly stuff. And the idea here is that there will be a gate people have to pass through for those replies from people who don't follow you to get to you. And Maiten has made a promise that this is going to be automated in the code, but it's going to be augmented by a community manager if the Kickstarter can hit $80,000. Right now it's at $41,000. And this community manager will help set the tone, set the policy, and help with curation when safe replies fail to kind of automatically catch problems. So unlike Twitter, which is completely open and, of course, has led to, we all have heard the stories and have seen them and experienced them of horrific abuse on Twitter, Safe Replies will be a way to help limit that. And I think micro.blog and app.net are safer environments from Twitter just because there is a payment piece, that it is a service that isn't necessarily open to everybody. And a lot of abuse online is anonymous, or someone creating a lot of accounts and automating abuse. And it seems like Maiten is thinking about that and building tools and building things into the service itself to limit those problems. And that's really encouraging to read, right? Like, I think people who have left Twitter, I think I read an article just a couple days ago of a woman who left Twitter after a string of abuse. And that happens to a lot of people, and that's terrible. And like, Twitter needs to fix it, and they seem unable or unwilling to. But it seems like Maiten is building those tools in from day one to ensure that micro.blog is a safe environment. And that's super important. It's something I think all three of us are big fans of. And so I kind of wanted to highlight that, like, just the big difference between this and app.net, which is, the thing people are connecting the two, really closely. And I think that's unfair to what Maiten is doing.
There's one thing that I wanted to kind of just get a clarification on, because I think in Manton's email to us, he said that like some of the confusion that I had about the service is confusion that he's working to try and give people more information to, right? But one of the things that keeps puzzling me a little bit is the service micro.blog is kind of like an app and a site that you sign into, and I would see your I don't know, posts, even if it was hosted on WordPress, they still go into the system so I can view it in a timeline, right? Like
right.
Even if you're doing the self-hosting thing somewhere else.
Exactly. So you don't have to go out to my, ISMH WordPress site. You could just follow me on microblog and see that content there.
Because you've put it in to the system.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's an uphill climb, which is both good and bad. It's definitely it requires a little more work, it seems like, or a little more technical savvy in some of these instances compared to something like Twitter, right? Where you just log in, you start posting, that's pretty much it. And it sounds like there is an option to do that kind of thing in micro.blog, but there's also the option to host stuff elsewhere. That's where I'm with like Myke, I get a little confused about whether is it two things? Is it like trying to sort of cast a wide net over content? And I think there are advantages to that, like you said, talking about payment plans. Like it's sort of a barrier to entry. You have a stake in being there, right? Like people aren't going to pay a couple bucks to necessarily troll people, and so that helps. But it also hinders in terms of getting a critical mass for a community. And I think that was one of the big problems app.net always had, which was you could get a certain amount of people in the door, but you need to have a critical mass in order for it to really be a self-sustaining success. And Twitter obviously has well over a critical mass, and that helps in some ways. It hinders in other ways, obviously, because it's really hard. It's a scaling problem. You can't have a community moderator on Twitter as easily because there's so much volume. And I wonder about that, too, for having a community moderator on micro.blog is in terms of volume. That person's job could be very, very hard, or it could be very easy. I don't know. It depends what kind of people are there. And so I think this is the kind of project that definitely appeals to people like us who are in sort of a tech-savvy community. I think it's, unlikely to obviously make a big dent into Twitter at large, just like app.net wasn't. And I've known Manton for a long time. He is a incredibly smart guy, and he has really thought hard about this whole owning your own content thing. And I think that's been a really big message and a really big goal for him. And so I think, it's a really interesting idea for a system. I'm a little bit, I don't want to say skeptical, that seems too harsh, but like I'm curious to see how this all plays out. And I've definitely seen a few other things arise that focus on the whole abuse issue. There's a service I've seen a couple people in my timeline talking about called IMZY, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with, IMZY, which I guess is sort of a micro-blogging type platform that has a very it's a message really based on safe communities and freedom from trolling. But the problem with all these communities is that it's really hard to create a social network that is popular, right? Some of that is luck.
One of the things that I want to touch on very quickly about the kind of we talk about like the barrier to entry type thing and how that can help. It also can hinder in diversity in the platform, like even just from the perspective of college kids, may not have the money, the disposable income to sign up for a service like this. Which app.net tried to solve this by adding free accounts, but that was kind of a nightmare. Like there is a problem here where, I could see like if this became the place where Nerd Twitter went, that Nerd Twitter would just have an even stronger diversity problem than it already has. And again, this is like, I'm sorry, Manton, right? But this is another thing you have to think about. Like if this is the type of thing that is going to be hosted, and I'm sure he is, but it's like it's just another barrier, right?
To put I was curious about this, so I was reading the Kickstarter. In the FAQ at the bottom, he does say, when it officially launches, micro.blog will be free for basic accounts and paid for extra features.
Okay.
And if you want micro.blog to host your microblog, for example, that's included in a $5 a month plan. So this is I'm with you, Myke. Like I have questions about like how exactly that plays out. What is a free level? What is an extra level? And it seems like he is definitely considering that because, like you said, I think college students is a great example. So many people don't want to pay for a $1 app, right? Getting into a recurring service is certainly a huge barrier to entry.
This is, this is the perils of trying to start a social network. It is, especially in 2017, what we expect from them is an incredibly well-established thing. And, the reason we're covering this is because it is of interest. I mean, I think I speak for many people when I say I would love something like app.net again, because that place was so nice, and Twitter is just less nice these days. And I think that everybody's a little bit rocked by the company's direction. And it's not even just about the content that occurs on Twitter or the types of things people receive. It's the platform holder seems to be unable to unable to kind of deal with it, and that we're definitely back at that place again where I think there is a wide desire for something else, but how that actually plays out is a whole other story. Moving on, Dan Provost of Studio Neat wrote a great blog post on the Studio Neat blog where he did some math, and this math is all about the 10.5-inch iPad and what it might end up being. We have been talking about this at length in recent episodes because it's something that is interesting to us all, I think, on this show, is about what could a 10.5-inch iPad look like a new iPad in the line, a new screen size. And Dan did some great math trying to look at what this could be. And basically, he took the premise of what if the 10.5-inch iPad did what the 12.9 did? So when the 12.9-inch iPad was unveiled, Apple spoke a bit about having the fact that the dimensions that they were going for and the resolution that they were going for was the same as the height. So the width of the 12.9-inch iPad was the same as the height of a 9.7-inch iPad. And the result was basically like having two full-size iPads side by side. So you could get two full-sized iPad apps side by side. Now, this math actually also could work out for a 10.5-inch iPad as well. Dan calculated that a 10.5-inch iPad could have the exact resolution of the 12.9, which is 2732 by 2048, but the same pixel density as an iPad mini at 256 pixels per inch. So in terms of dimensions, a 10.5-inch iPad would be the same height as two iPad minis. So in effect, everything would be smaller, but you could have two full-sized iPad apps in portrait mode side by side.
It was my understanding there would be no math.
Well, there's little math.
A little bit of math. I think this makes a lot of sense. Remember when they introduced the iPad Pro and Schiller was like, why did we get to the size? And he had the graphic about the 9.7-inch iPad turning it over. And it makes sense from that perspective. It also makes sense that they would not want to introduce a third, or I guess really a third resolution, second resolution. I don't know. How many resolutions are there in the iPad? They don't want to introduce another one. And they don't want to change pixel density. They want to make this as easy for developers as possible. And so to get to where they are elsewhere on the line would be a big goal. And you don't want to take the same resolution that you had on the 9.7 and just scale it up. I mean, this really feels like this is what's going on. And the in the post, Dan has a picture of a 10.5-inch sheet of paper over a 9.7-inch screened iPad, and it fits within the same chassis, which is really lines up with the rumors. The thing is going to have very minimal side bezels and is going to be the same physical size as the 9.7, but have a bigger screen and kind of in the same amount of space. And so I think Dan's onto something here. Not all Dans are great, but Dan Provost is great. So.
He's the better Dan of the two. He makes me want to be a better Dan.
There you go.
You know what? The thing that's curious to me about this is, like, at some point in the rumors, people were talking about this coexisting with the 9.7-inch. And to me, especially looking at Dan's picture with the piece of paper, I don't see why you would keep the 9.7-inch around if the chassis is the same size. I mean, other than keeping it around as sort of the legacy model that will keep selling. But to me, the 10.5-inch screen, I feel like might as well just replace the 9.7-inch screen if the physical device is the same size. Otherwise, it seems really confusing and weird because it's not that big a difference, right? It's less than an inch. in terms of screen difference, and I can't think of there would be a lot of people that it just adds confusion, right? Like you got people sitting there going, do I want the 9.7 or 10.5? Well, I'm going to bring my tape measure into the store and start thinking about this. So I think that the case for the 10.5 inch is definitely compelling, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't just replace the 9.7 inch with it entirely. Keep the 9.7 inch Pro around as the cheaper model going forward. But yeah, why keep both? It seems crazy.
And that's their MO these days with the iPad, right? How long was the iPad 2 for sale? It was like 10 years. So
yeah.
I do think what it will do is it'll make the 9.7 look old immediately. Sometimes like when they went with the Mini and then the Air, and then suddenly the iPad 4 just looked like this, relic. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they work that out. But as we've been saying, talking about this iPad, this is something that I'm interested in, having used the 12.9 and then getting rid of it because I felt it was too bulky to use in everyday life unless I was at my desk. The 9.7 does feel cramped as far as resolution, and so to have something that's kind of splits the difference gets a thumbs up.
Yep.
This week's episode of Connected is brought to you by Eero. These days, everything in our homes seems to want to have an internet connection, whether you have a million iPads and more iPads on the way, or you have a smart lock, or you have home canister devices that you speak to, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the show. All of these things need to talk to the internet to get the information that they need. Or maybe you just want to watch something on Netflix or Hulu, or listen to some music on Apple Music or Spotify. You need Wi-Fi for all of these. It's the foundation for all of the stuff in our homes these days. But Wi-Fi is kind of broken because connections can be slow, unresponsive, and inconsistent. So to get the best possible connection today, you kind of need a distributed system that can provide you with a connection all over the home. Previously, this has either been expensive or complicated to do, but not anymore. With Eero, you can install an enterprise-grade Wi-Fi system in your home in just a few minutes. This isn't just a simple extender technology. Each Eero box that they have has 2 radios inside of it. This keeps your connection fast, keeps everything in sync, and on one network name. You don't have to connect to multiple networks in your home and move between them and open settings and change it around. You don't have to do any of that. Eero is just one network, and it covers your home in a fast blanket of Wi-Fi, which is all snuggly inside for your devices. The Eero app that it comes with will be super simple to help you set it up. You can get this on iOS and Android. It will walk you through the whole process. And then also you can manage your network from the palm of your hand, so you'll know how many devices are connected at any given point, as well as the internet speed that you're getting from your service provider. Eero is simple to set up. It's a great looking device. It's just this nice little white little box. Super easy to plug in. You set them up. The iOS app will talk you through the whole process, and then you're going to get parts of your home covered in Wi-Fi all over the place, faster than ever before. Your house will almost have too much Wi-Fi in it when you get an Eero. The average house in the US is easily covered by between 2 or 3 Eero devices, so a 3-pack is a really good starting point. If you live in a large space and need more, you can add up to 10 in total, and because of their 30-day money-back guarantee, any that you don't need, you can just return to Eero and they'll give you a full refund for it. So get as many as you think you might need, set them all up, see how it goes, and then send any back that you don't need, and you'll get your money back. If you want to find out more about Eero and get one for yourself, just go to Eero.com. That's EERO.com. That's EERO.com. And because you listen to this show, you will get free overnight shipping if you just select the overnight shipping option at checkout and enter the code CONNECTED, and you'll get it the very next day. Thank you so much to Eero for their support of this show and Relay FM. I saw some upsetting news today. Very upsetting news. As soon as I saw it, I was not surprised. Apple made some pricing changes yesterday in a few different territories. So, for example, I believe in India, Turkey, and in Romania, they made some price adjustments for taxation changes that are going on in those countries. But in the UK, they put all the prices up. Because of fluctuating currency exchange in the United Kingdom, which just continues to get weirder and weirder every single day, Apple has raised the prices of applications and in-app purchases by at least 25% across the board. So now a 99-cent application in the App Store costs 99 pence as opposed to 75 pence, which it was before, and that's tier 1, I think. So now, an app that you get in America as of today's kind of exchange rates, it will cost you 99 cents. It will cost me $1.25. And apps that previously cost £1.49 will be $1.99, which is about $2.40 for a $1.99 application. So as it stands right now, we're kind of looking at numbers being basically the same. So a $1.99 application is a £1.99 app. I mean, I can't really be annoyed at anyone about this. This is just the way that our economy is right now in this country, as our government continues to push forward on a decision that was made by a selection of people in our country some time ago. So and it's changing the strength of the pound. So things are fluctuating. We spoke about this recently when Apple put out the MacBook Pro. They put up the prices of basically all of their devices. And there is a possibility that we may see further increases. I think that we're probably kind of in the region that it's going to be, because even the hardware products, they tend to be like dollar and pound figure being the same, like $100 is £100. And that's basically where we are with the App Store now as well. There's nothing I can say about it. Like, this is how it is. At least now you can just say the app is 99, and everyone in the US and the UK can work it out on their own. So that's good for consistency. That's the silver lining on all of this, really. It's just consistency. So I'm very happy about that.
This is just more math, Mike. Jeez.
I know. I'm really sorry. We had a discussion before the show, and I promised Dan there'd be no math, but actually there's more numbers in this episode than ever before. Yeah, I mean, this is what it is, right? Like, I'm not upset about Apple. I'm not upset. I can't be. It's like, this is just the way it is. They're right. Kind of doing what they do.
Currency fluctuations are a much larger problem than just a single company, obviously. So, there needs to be some correction for that, given the way that it's going. And it's like you said, it's hard to be mad about it, at least as far as Apple goes. I welcome you to be mad about the factors that led to this.
Yep.
But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, it's just, like you said, it's part of the world. And we should point out, it wasn't just the UK. So Romania, like 19 or 20%. Russia had a VAT of 18% added. It was up in India. I mean, they're making adjustments in different markets that are handling things in different ways. So I mean, I get your point. Like it is lame. Like I'm sorry you have to spend more money, but it's just like Dan said, it's just part of the world.
Yep.
Right. So. We're talking about Apple Music.
Is it even music though?
Let's get into this.
It's everything.
So Jimmy Iovine went on what I'm going to call a media whirlwind, I guess, a blitz, saying crazy things about Apple Music. So last week, the Wall Street Journal had sources they were unable to name saying that Apple was looking to push further into creating original TV shows. And this, comes on the heels of stuff, I guess, like the last year we've been talking about this, and they've only really commented on a couple of shows publicly.
So they have the app show.
Planet of the Apps.
Planet of the Apps. Oh, man, I pushed that name out of my brain.
Yeah, that's coming back.
So good. Good.
Planet of the Apps, which is, star-studded. We have Carpool Karaoke and that Dr. Dre drama music show, right? Yeah, I think they're the three that we know about that Apple are creating so far. And these rumors to the Wall Street Journal, they seem a little bit kind of the phrases that they were getting, it seems a little bit optimistic that Apple is trying to acquire and or create television shows of the quality level of something like Westworld or Stranger Things. I mean, I don't know if that's how it works. Like, that you decide you want to make really good TV, so you just do.
Well, I think you pay good people to make good TV, right? Like Apple's not gonna, like Eddie Q's not gonna be. Oh God, Eddie Q's probably not gonna be in the director's chair. But it's about finding the people who have those abilities and giving them tools.
Nobody goes out and says, we want to make television of the caliber of Kevin Can Wait. Like, that's not a thing that anybody says.
So, but I mean, I get that point, right? Like, you find good people and you pay them, but I also don't think, and at least this article seems to indicate, that Apple is not looking to spend a lot of money on this. They're not looking to spend Netflix or Amazon levels of money on this. That they are kind of just looking to get they're just looking to get like a couple of shows that they want to put into what it would seem to be into Apple Music. They're not really, I mean, that's kind of unclear right now, but what it seems like they're trying to do is to make Apple Music more compelling, to give them a competitive edge over Spotify as opposed to going after Netflix.
Absolutely. I'm going to take full credit for this, by the way, because last week I wrote a column over at Macworld that was entirely about this, and it basically right before the Jimmy Iovine, started his little blitz, and I feel like, man, I hope you read my article because he's saying everything that I said, which, I agree 100%. It's hard. Here's the thing. We've got half a dozen probably solid streaming music competitors. And at a certain point, it's mostly about ecosystem, right? Like, if you want to be in the Apple ecosystem, you sign up for Apple Music. If you're in the Amazon ecosystem, you sign up for Amazon Music. If you don't really care, you sign up for Spotify, right? But at a certain extent, the content that's available with them probably overlaps 90+% of the time. And the prices are generally within the same range. So what draws you to sign up for one instead of the other? At the end of the day, I think that exclusive content is a big draw, especially if you can produce something that the critical acclaim of which matches something like Westworld or Stranger Things. Not even critical acclaim, but there's no accident that they picked those shows. Those are the two shows that everybody was talking about in the last year, right? Those were the water cooler shows. And so if you want to create a show that's at the level of everybody is talking about the show, and therefore you are going to go sign up for the service because you don't want to feel like you're left out by not having access to those things, that is a great plan. It's a brilliant plan as far as, drawing more people into your service. Whether or not it'll work is, obviously depends on the quality of the shows that they end up with. But I think that it makes a lot of sense, since they're probably feeling like maybe they're not getting a lot of traction under Apple Music, to broaden that. I also think a big part of this is they've been trying to get a streaming TV service off the ground for years now, and it hasn't worked because the content providers are basically retreating to their shells. A, they saw what Apple did to the music industry. B, they found that they can monetize that on their own in many cases. And C, they just don't want to deal with Apple. They're used to having control and being they've got their little niche carved out for them. So I think Apple's eventually going to get fed up and say, you know what, let's just do it ourselves. Maybe that'll draw more content from other traditional studios and networks if they show some success, or maybe they'll be scared off because they don't want to compete with Apple's in-house content. I don't know. But, I think for Apple, the big question is, can they do this well? And can they do it, if not profitably, then without, going into debt or spending a ton of money on something that ends up being a flop? I don't know. They haven't really shown a huge track record with either of those things yet.
In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter on Saturday, Jimmy Iovine said, at Apple Music, what we're trying to create is an entire pop culture experience. Entire pop culture experience. That's the quote. And that happens to include audio and video. We're fighting free, so a simple utility where here's all the songs, here's all the music, give me $10 and we're cool is not going to scale. I mean, so it definitely indicates, it's a very smart point. And again, Iovine is doing what he does, which I think is just speaking in a way that Apple would maybe prefer he didn't, because that's incredibly honest.
Yep.
He burned down his own business model.
Oh, Eddie's over there cursing to himself as he reads the Hollywood Reporter.
Why do I let him do this? But it's a good point, right? Which is they have no free model, so you have to go into Apple Music and you pay for a reason, whatever that reason would be. And if one of the reasons was it's the way that I get that TV show people are talking about, it makes sense, right? I can see that. Totally. It makes sense. However, I do think that if they're looking to create shows that aren't, so that one of the things that came from this report is that these TV shows aren't necessarily going to be musical focused, right? Some of the other stuff that they're doing is music focused or focused around Apple in some way, right? Like apps or the carpool karaoke, right? Those things maybe make sense in Apple Music. But let's say that they try and create something like a drama or something, or like a thriller. Putting it inside of Apple Music just seems like a strange thing. It's like, oh, did you see that like new TV show? Where is it? Oh, it's on Apple's thing. And then people go to like the iTunes store. It's like Apple Music seems like a weird branding.
They would have to, I think, alter the branding if they're going to do that. The other interesting aspect of this is, so traditionally Apple has used media sales to push devices, right? That was the whole point of the iTunes store, was people would buy the music. Apple didn't necessarily make a lot of money off the content, but people would buy iPods and later iPhones. And so the question is, does that model work here as well? Apple Music is weird, right? Because it does exist on Android. And so there's a question of, well, would content available on Apple's own platforms also be available on Android platforms? Part of me thinks no. Part of me thinks that they would launch it and say, Apple Video, or whatever they're going to call this subset of it, is only supported on Apple devices, to thus also bolster their back end by convincing people to, or giving another reason for people to buy iOS devices or Macs or Apple TVs, really. So I'm interested to see how that plays out, because this is an odd service in that they do offer an Android client, and it's pretty much the only support they have for Android, like across the board. So yeah, that's going to be a big question for them, is whether or not they're going to use it to try and push hardware sales, or whether this is just a pure up services play. And the services division has been doing very well, so I could see the argument for that as well.
I think it's interesting too that this would be a service that potentially would have music and TV shows and video stuff all under one, sort of one service, one, I guess, monthly bill, unless Jimmy can make it free. And that really sets it apart, right? Netflix doesn't have that. Spotify doesn't have that.
Amazon sort of has it, but not really.
Yeah, I mean, if you pay for Prime, you get both video and music, but there's separate interfaces.
And the music is much more limited than if you pay for their music service on top of that.
Right. Yeah. So that I find really interesting. How do you package those things together? How do you have an iOS app that has those things in it together? I mean, maybe they shove the video stuff into the new TV app. But it's like, that's really what's interesting to me, is Apple looking at doing this potentially as one service. But maybe it is like Amazon Prime, right? You pay for Apple Music and you get music and video. It's kind of separate interfaces, kind of separate things. But it could be a way to set Apple apart from their competitors in this space, that by doing this, maybe they're not taking on Netflix directly, maybe they're not taking on Spotify directly. But hey, if you just want a bunch of streaming stuff and audio and video, kind of like what he's saying, then we have this one thing and you get both, and you don't have to worry about paying for Netflix and Spotify. We kind of have both types of things under one monthly bill.
There is a question of, like, in 3 or 4 years' time, how much money are we going to be paying to get all of the TV?
Yep. I mean, it basically, have we just recreated the cable model?
I think so, but you just it's all online, and it's you don't have to get you don't pay once and get a ton of stuff you don't want. You just pay for what you want. But unfortunately, what you want is on 4 different services that all cost $10 a month. Thank you very much.
Yep. So we've just removed a middleman, or potentially created a new middleman if somebody eventually comes up with a way to put all that together.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I'm not a cable subscriber. I never have personally been, and I don't expect to ever be. What we have here, do we have an option of cable and then also satellite with Sky, which is the I think still the biggest player. And there are a few different ways to get TV here. We have quite a good free digital service, which is kind of blanketed across the nation. Of course, we have our TV license that everybody must pay, but that's a whole different thing for a whole other time. But I have always been somebody who just pays for services, right? So I have a couple of services that I pay for. I pay for Netflix. I don't pay for Amazon Prime. I get Amazon Prime because I'm a Prime customer, right? Like I don't give. I mean, I watch Amazon Prime TV shows, but I don't really consider that a service that I explicitly pay for, because it's not. I get it for free because I want next day delivery for free on Amazon stuff. And then I guess in the same way, like, I'll get Apple's TV shows for free because I'm an Apple Music customer. But there's it's just starting to get a little bit more peculiar as time goes on, that we're ending up just with, like, just moving the price and complexity of cable to apps. And
Right.
it's like, I want to watch that show. Where do I go? Well, you need to go to this thing and go to that thing. Dan, you'll be very happy to know that I just bought an Amazon Fire Stick.
Ah. Congratulations.
Thank you. I was away this weekend and was in a hotel and needed to watch like a TV show as part of like this event that I was going to. And I had nothing with me that I could use for it except for getting something and plugging it into a TV. So I went with a Fire Stick. There's just like a bunch of weird reasons that it makes sense this way. It's a super long story. It's not that exciting. But so the Fire Stick, I needed something to plug into the TV in the hotel room so I could watch this thing with a few different people. Right? It's basically, imagine watching a WWDC keynote in a hotel room. It's that idea, right? That's kind of the situation. So the best thing for that job was an Amazon Fire Stick. So I plugged it in, and then kind of as I was looking through, I was like, oh, I've just realized something. The Amazon Fire Stick has all of the streaming services that I want, where Apple TV is missing Amazon.
Right. So if you want Amazon but not iTunes, then the Fire TV Stick is a clear winner. If you want iTunes but don't care about Amazon, then the Apple TV is, frankly, better in that case, obviously. But you're never going to get anything that has all of them. Is the problem.
So like I now will have two of them hooked up to the TV, which we're going to be getting within a couple of weeks' time. And then, because we were using the Apple TV before we moved constantly, it was just the way that I watched like YouTube and Netflix. But we're currently rewatching Parks and Recreation. So for the time that we're doing that on a TV, we'll use the Amazon Stick for that, because that's where we watch it, because that's where it is in the UK. I don't know what it's like elsewhere, but in the UK, Amazon has all of it. So I'm wondering if, like, over the time of doing this, am I just going to start picking up the Fire Stick remote instead of the Apple TV remote? I don't know. But anyway, the reason I mention all of this is because this kind of just plays into, like, the complexities of it all. Because let's say we're in a world where we need to subscribe to 4 different services. You then need to have the box or device that has all of them.
Right.
And currently, that's going to get more tricky because Amazon won't put theirs on for whatever reason on Apple's, and you can bet your bottom dollar that Apple Music won't be coming to the Amazon Fire Stick. So then it's not even just you need to have all of these different plans. You then also need all of the various devices to play all these shows.
Yeah, it's funny because my Fire Stick / Apple TV usage ends up being invariably I try to watch a show and one of them is not behaving well. Like I've had the Hulu app on the Apple TV like freak out and not want to play anything. And it's like I could spend the time restarting this, or I could press this button on my Harmony remote, switch over to the Fire TV and just watch it there instead, which is a very, very, I feel like a first world. It's like day streaming box, night streaming box. Like, why do I have 2 of these things?
Here's the other question, right? Here's the elephant in the room question. I'll ask you first, Stephen. Do you want Apple to be putting their effort into this?
I mean, so the complaint a lot of people have in this sort of thing is, they're doing this, but they're not paying attention to X. Insert your favorite Apple product here that hasn't been updated. Like that's not a real argument. It's not like Mac Pro engineers are going to be editing a TV show, right? That's kind of a BS argument. And I understand that if they want to be competitive in this space, that video is part of that world. And that if they want the Apple TV and they want Apple Music to be more valuable to customers, then they need additional content. So I am okay with it. I'm not in love with the idea just because Apple hasn't proven that they can be a media company. Like even in the iTunes Store days, Dan, like what you were saying, like they were really a retailer more than anything. So it's new in that sense, and I hope that if they get into it and they stink at it, that they get out, that they understand that it's not for them. But I'm okay with them trying, and I'm okay. It seems to be they're being very slow and very deliberate about it, and that does make me feel better about it. Now, what would make me feel really great is if Apple could land, third-party content deals, and that seems like it's not happening, and this kind of reinforces that in my mind, that if they're doing this, they really don't have other content to put on their streaming service, and that makes me sad. But overall, I'm okay with it. I'm not in love with it, and I guess it is what it is.
I mean, my feeling on it is I know the idea of like the Mac team on working on this instead of Macs, but there maybe is an argument for just like focus of the company. Like what is the company focusing themselves on, and is that the right direction?
Well, I mean, that sort of argument lends itself to the conversation we had weeks ago or months ago with that Vox article about Apple being a functional organization.
Yeah.
Like, if this falls under Eddie Q and, services and iTunes and like all this also falls under Eddie Q, then like his team and his organization is maybe doing too much. And this is where the argument that the functional organization doesn't work anymore is really strong in my mind. That, like, you can do this, but don't put it under Q. Like, don't put it under an organization that already has a lot of other stuff to do. And of course, we don't know how it works internally, but that's like the thing that springs to mind immediately is that, yes, the Mac Pro engineer, the one guy left, isn't doing this, but there are resources being diverted somewhere. And so I totally get what you're saying, and I think it's a part of that broader conversation.
It's the executive headspace that you're worried about more than the
right.
the workers who are working on a specific product, right? It's how
Yep.
you're talking about the direction of the company and how the executives and leadership is thinking about where their priorities are. And if they do end up with things where they have to be like, let's adjust, let's give more money over here, or let's de-emphasize this product because it's not doing as much for us, then, that there is a concern as far as that goes. But it is a big company, and they do have a ton of money. So as far as them trying it, at least, I don't see any problem with it. But I agree with Stephen, if it doesn't work, you'll cut your losses.
You could help fix the executive headspace problem by promoting people, right? That you can have, that also would help potentially your diversity issue in your executive ranks. That, maybe it's time for
New executives.
Yeah, for a senior vice president of content, right? Maybe it's time for separate software heads and not just Craig. I mean, some of those people exist within Apple and we don't see them, right? Because they're just LinkedIn pages that no one comes across and they're not on the executive page. But I would hope that if this does take off, right, that Apple really hits something magic and this just is really successful for them, that, maybe it's time to have somebody on that executive page that's over content. It frees up Eddie Q to do the other things he's responsible for, and it gives you an opportunity to diversify that page and to bring new voices and new faces into the conversation. And there's no losing in that. So hopefully, Apple sees that as an opportunity. Maybe they experiment and then graduate it into its own thing. Like, that'd be a really interesting thing to see. Some companies would be tempted to spin it out into its own separate, subsidiary or something that's not really Apple style anymore. But creating an organization around this, if it's successful, I think is key, and not lobbing it into the same team that is doing all of this other stuff.
Yeah, I just hope that there isn't a trend which seems to have been manifesting itself with Apple's product releases recently, that there is an element in the executive team of wanting to be celebrities and to hobnob with Hollywood. There have been a lot more celebrity call-outs on stage, people coming on stage, phone calls being made to people as part of awkward product demos.
Beyond Eddie, though, you think? I mean, I feel like that we get that a lot with Eddie, but I'm not sure that the rest of the team does it as much.
You too,
You didn't
man.
like Drake's cool Apple jacket? That thing was awesome.
Oh, man.
And it's just okay, so let's say that Eddie does feel that way. Well, doesn't this fall under Eddie? This whole initiative, this TV initiative?
I would think
Assumedly,
so, probably, yeah.
So I don't know, this is completely unfounded, right? But it's just there seems to have just been more focus on Apple and celebrities, and I just don't know if this is another step in that realm.
Frankly, put Eddie in charge of content and promote someone else to be in charge of services.
Sure.
Because I don't think anybody has ever felt like Eddie's services division is necessarily
Eddie's
the one
service
that's
division.
or that it's really it's benefiting from his close attention, right? This is the whole issue with iCloud when iCloud was, under services and App Store, right? Everybody's kind of felt is this the right place for this to be? Especially the App Store stuff, I feel like, before it got moved to Phil. Like, everybody was like, yeah, really? Do we want Eddie in charge of this while he's working on, like, cutting his content deals? Seems weird.
There's no content deals getting cut anymore.
Yeah, exactly. What is he doing with all this time? He's going to Golden State Warriors games.
Yeah, he opens a calendar app and is just like, oh, they got nothing to do today. Let's make a TV show.
Well, either that or Jimmy's just gone rogue at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, I don't know about all of this. I don't know how I really feel about this. Like,
search
Apple,
your feelings, Mike.
You know it to be true. If Apple really are able to create great TV shows, great. I'm very happy for that. But things are just getting weirder and weirder as like the things that I expect, and I don't know. It's just a strange new world that we're kind of bumbling our way into. This week's episode is also brought to you by a new sponsor for this show, and that is Incapsula. Incapsula is a cloud service that makes your website faster and safer. They have a worldwide network that can inspect every single packet that comes and goes from your site, blocking attacks against it whilst delivering your content to your customers faster. Incapsula protects and accelerates over 4 million websites every single day, from individual bloggers all the way up to Fortune 500 companies. Like, if you go to their website, like, it has one of those things where it shows you the types of customers that they have. Huge companies that use Incapsula. They have tons of resources that you can take advantage of to help your website load like a dream, as well as their 24/7 operations team, who are there whenever you need them if you have any problems. Incapsula have over 100,000 customers that span to millions, those 4 million sites across the web. Do not worry, Incapsula have got this. You're going to be well protected, and your site is going to be lightning fast. As a listener of this show, you can get yourself 1 whole month of service for free. You just need to go to incapsula.com/connected. That's incapsula.com/connected. You'll find out more here and get the code that you need to claim your free month. Thank you so much to Incapsula for their support of this show and Relay FM. So having Dan Moren on the show means that we must talk about digital assistant canisters, because Dan Moren is the canary in the coal mine when it comes to voice assistants. You know,
it worries me when you say this, Mike, because it means that if the voice assistants become homicidal, I will be the first to go.
You will be the first to go.
The cautionary tale.
So, like, I think that, I mean, of everybody that I knew, you were extolling the virtues of the Amazon Echo way before. Like, you got one of those things pretty early on, right?
Yeah, I think I had, if not one of the original round of them, pretty close. I think I tried to pre-order one. I think I had one pretty early.
And you also now own a Google Home as well.
I do. That might have been a mistake, but we'll see. If they do, now they outnumber me is the problem.
So you do too, Stephen, right? We haven't spent a ton of time talking about it, but you have a Google Home as well.
I do, and I'm curious to hear Dan's thoughts on this. But for me, the Echo was already so entrenched and hooked up to all these things and set up with all these skills, and in trying to duplicate that on the Google Home product proved difficult, and you know, Google's improving it and they're making strides, but Amazon has a head start here. And so I kept finding things on the Google Home that, you know, were just annoying to set up again, or, you know, didn't quite work the way I wanted them to. But I do have both, but like in my office, like the Echo is what's plugged in, and the kitchen as well. The Home has not replaced them yet. Right now, the Google Home is next to my Echo Dot, and sometimes I will talk to it as opposed to the Echo. But I have definitely not switched, and definitely don't think I'm going to be anytime soon. But what is really interesting is that because Google has access to my calendars and my contacts and my email, that there is, you know, some more integration stuff there, which is potentially interesting. But for me, so far, just kind of interesting on paper, that I haven't done much with those sorts of things with my voice. And maybe it's because I've been trained by Amazon that I can't do it by voice. But like on paper, that's a benefit. But in practice, at least for me, I'm curious what Dan thinks, has not been a game changer.
Well, yeah, if you already have, I think my conclusion after looking at these two things is that the overlap is very high in terms of what they do, right? They both let you sort of ask queries. They both can do like certain utility tasks like set timers. They can both do calendar access. They can both control some smart home appliances. They can both play music. Like a lot of what they do is very similar. And so if you already have an Echo, you're probably not in the market for a Google Home. If you're making that decision off the bat, well, do I want a Google Home or do I want an Amazon Echo? That becomes a little bit harder and a little bit more about what your priorities are. Mm-hmm. And I think right now, in most cases, the Echo has a leg up because, as Stephen said, it's got a big head start, and there's a lot of stuff that's integrated with it that is not available on the Home yet. I do know one friend of my acquaintance who opted to buy a Google Home off the bat because the one thing it could do that the Echo could not was it could do translation, so you could ask it how to say a word in a different language. And they're specifically, he and his wife are raising their son is about 1, and his wife is from Taiwan, and so they're trying to teach him both English and Chinese, and so. Having that to be able to, like, especially for him, because he is not of Chinese descent, so he doesn't know Chinese, to be able to ask the Google Home, like, how do you say this word in Chinese, and have it speak it aloud is pretty cool and pretty handy. And so, I think there are little use cases like that might tip you in one direction or the other. But right now, both of these are kind of still in nascent stages. Amazon also obviously has this huge advantage of these skills in terms of third-party development, and Google so far does not really offer that. So there isn't a lot of expansion capability right now. Mm-hmm. There's no reason that couldn't come later because there's nothing, I would say, in the hardware that precludes it, but Google has not decided to make that choice yet.
Let me come back to skills and services in a minute, because I think that's quite a big topic. But the Home was interesting to me because it has Google behind it, and Google has the answer to everything, right? In theory, you Google it. That's how we get answers to everything in modern day life. We put it
Right.
into Google. And if I'm correct, Amazon with the Echo uses Bing, I think, for the search.
That sounds right. Yeah.
So, I can't speak to how much information Bing has because I don't know. But what I know is that Google isn't just like a pure search engine. We know this. Google takes some of the questions that you give it and gives you answers that the system understands as opposed to just looking on the web. So translation is a great example of that, right? Like there may be some search engines where if you typed in like, how do you say cheese in Romanian, it might take you to a website that can give you that answer, where Google is just going to use Google Translate and just tell you what it is.
Right.
And speak it to you if you want, right? Like, and it will do that on the web. So I'm wondering, are there more instances like this where the Google Home is able to give you answers to questions that the Echo is unable to do?
In my experience, hard to say because, as Stephen pointed out, one of the problems with having both of these things is remembering which thing you're going to address a question to. And there are definitely times I've tested them back to back. I feel like I've had ones that they've both failed on, and then I've had ones where I think in general it seems like the Google Home does provide, if not a broader answer to questions, often a deeper answer to questions, because we've all had those instances where you search Google for some particular query, and it'll often not only give you a list of hits, but it'll give you that little box at the top where it's like called the relevant section from like the top hit. I often do it, and this just tell you a bit more about me. I often do it when I'm Googling how long something like food is good, like, oh, how long does like chicken last in my fridge, right? And it'll like call the first hit and be like, oh, it says from this site that chicken will last this days. And the Google Home will actually read that like excerpt aloud.
Yeah. See, I find that I ask those sort of questions to my Echo where I'll say like, how long, what temperature is chicken breast cooked at? And it can't give me an answer that I want. But my assumption would be that the Google Home would, because what I do when the Echo cannot answer that is open my smartphone, I open my web browser, I type it in, I type in to go to Google, I do the search, and it does that thing, right, where it pulls out the box, and it's like such and such website says it's such and such degrees Celsius. And my
right.
assumption would be, as I think you kind of said there, Dan, is that Google Home will read that back to you, that's, I guess, the most useful. Or like, what Siri will do, be like, I found this on the web for you.
Right,
no,
exactly.
No, it's not. What I want is the assistant to speak the answer back to me, having found it. Because
if you're asking using your voice, there's a reason you're doing that and not looking at a screen.
Yeah.
You've already made that decision to interact, in that way. So obviously there's a reason behind it. It's like hands-free in a car, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't start showing me, the iPhone is smart enough in many cases that if it knows, or at least in the sort of car kit stuff, if it knows you're asking for something, it's, oh, I'm in a car. I'm not going to respond with this. I'm just going to speak it aloud or whatever. And so that is a win in terms of voice interacted assistance. Is you really do want it to speak it aloud because either you're hands deep in your chicken at that point and you're like, oh man, my hands are covered with raw chicken, I don't want to go Google this on my phone, right? And so I think that the queries do seem like Google certainly, it's positioned very well as a device that's sort of like your answer box, right? Where it's like, I need the answer to this question, let me ask this box. There are definitely things, the thing that befuddles me that I can't figure out why none of these things do is, I often try, one of my test queries is always, tell me when the next episode of a specific TV show is on, and neither of them can do this. I don't understand why, because I feel like that's data is structured out there somewhere. There's no reason I shouldn't be able to ask, like, when's the next episode of Arrow on, and have it just say, oh, it's, Wednesday, January 23rd or whatever. That should be totally doable. But it's possible that it's just like, it's not getting enough core.
Yeah, that feels like one of the things that Apple was talking a lot about with the Apple TV, which is about passing that information correctly. Like, it could do it, but it doesn't know what Arrow is. When you're initially asking that question, it can't work out the answer to that.
The context.
Right? It doesn't know what that means. And that feels like 90% of the battle, right? It's understanding what it's searching or where it's looking for, or what is the noun in this statement.
Right, it's all the machine learning stuff that they've been talking about so much recently. This is where this comes into play.
How well do you feel? I guess it goes both of you. Like how well do you feel these devices hear you? Do you feel there's any difference there? Like, Stephen, do you think there's any difference from the Home to the Echo about which device, not necessarily like how it understands you, but just how well it seems to hear you?
I think the full size Echo is probably the best out of the three. I think the Echo Dot isn't super great. I haven't had widespread problems with the Google Home by any means, but that full size Echo, it can hear me across the house, like rooms over, with music playing. It's really impressive. By far, I think it's the most impressive out of any of these, but that doesn't mean that I haven't had any problems with the Google Home, but the Echo seems to be in a class to itself.
Some of it depends on placement. I've noticed my Echo's in my kitchen, and it's pretty close to the wall. And I think sometimes it gets weird if, maybe this will tell you more about me than anything else, but I'll have like something else on the kitchen table that's of the Echo height, like a box of cereal, and it just happens to be sitting between me and the Echo. And I actually find sometimes that interferes with it. Like, if I move it, it will hear me better if I'm calling from like someplace where the box is in between us. My Dot is in my office, and I also have the weird thing where they added a feature to the Echoes where supposedly they can use multiple devices and then will answer on whichever one they think is appropriate. And so there's a place I can stand in my living room and both of them can hear me from there. And sometimes it makes really weird decisions about that. Like, I'll be in my kitchen asking a question and it will respond on the Dot in my office. And I'm like, I don't know what made you think that was the right answer, but it was not. So you need a little tweaking on that algorithm. The Home, I think, has been pretty solid. I have it, like, as I'm talking to you right now, I'm on my iMac, which is my recording setup, and the Home is about 4 inches from me. So certainly if I'm sitting at my desk, it's fine. I've used it sitting in the living room, which is probably about 10 feet away, and it's totally fine from there. My house is not huge, so this is not like a big problem I end up running into. I think that they're all pretty good. I would agree with Stephen that the full-size Echo probably has the best. And then, the Dot, I don't know. It's fine. It's obviously not the size as far as the speaker goes, but I think the mics are fairly similar. And then the Home only has 2 mics, but, it doesn't seem like it hasn't had any problems for sure.
I I found recently that we've kind of moved things around in the kitchen, and if we have our extractor fan on, or, like above the hob, like the hood, the Echo just cannot hear us. Like,
Yeah, it doesn't like white noise that it's not producing.
I was standing in front of it today and shouting at it, and the light wasn't even coming on.
Yep.
So I don't know if maybe there's going to be a better place in the kitchen that we need to put it in, but it seems to be getting quite upset at points. But it doesn't seem consistent with that. It's very strange.
You know, it's funny. It has trouble. I often use it while I'm washing dishes, and when you have the water running. Which, if you've watched any classic spy movie, everybody knows when you want to avoid being detected by bugs, you turn the water on. So apparently that works. Obviously, it can correct to a certain degree when it's playing music because it knows what it's playing. And so I think it does a good job of being able to respond even when you're playing music, but only if its music is producing. I've also had instances where I'm playing music from, say, my Sonos. And it does not know about that, right? So it doesn't like that because it's just getting noise that it can't really, it can't interpret the difference between a song, playing with lyrics and me trying to talk to it.
Yeah, I just, it's strange. Like, there's another thing that I've been trying to do, because I feel like that the Echo struggles to hear Adina more than me. So we wanted to do the voice training, but that's not available in the UK. So you can't do like the voice training of the command words. It's just a very I've noticed, like, with the rollout to the UK, there are just some weird parts that are missing on this thing.
Yeah, and it's definitely international support is definitely the biggest ding, I guess. I think against both of these. I'm not sure the Google Home is any better.
It's not anywhere else except the US, right?
Yeah,
now.
I think it's just the US. So yeah, they at least Amazon is trying to expand, but it's definitely been a slow rollout.
What about the iOS app? I assume it needs an iOS app, the Google Home. What is that like?
It is Home, so it's the same app that it used for, I want to say, like Chromecast device management. Okay. Yeah, they moved that, right? It used to have a Chromecast app, and I think it's now in Google Home. It's fine. It's obviously very similar in some ways to the Alexa app. It's got same sort of thing where it's got breakdowns on, like, here's the music services you want to connect to. I think it might be predominantly a web view. I think I was reading about this somewhere. Somebody was saying if you're like trying to use it with in airplane mode or something, it mostly won't work because everything it's loading is kind of, it's Google. Everything is kind of a web view. It's fine. It neither blows me away nor disappoints me. I guess it's really just like there for setup mostly. It does have some of the same things that the Amazon app does in terms of, like, here's a list of all the queries you've made. You can remove some of this data if you don't want it stored. Here's an overview of devices. I do like the one other feature I really do like about the Google Home, which is true in the app, or partially available in the app, is you can tell it to output audio or video to a Chromecast. And so if you have a Chromecast setup that's connected to your TV, for example, you could say, open Netflix on my Chromecast, and it'll open Netflix on your Chromecast, or play this song on my audio Chromecast, and it will start doing that, which is a place I think the Echo has not really gotten into. I'm kind of surprised that with the Fire TV and Fire TV Stick, that you can't say to your Echo, oh yeah, open the Hulu app on my Fire TV, and it will just do it, because that seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, especially like if for whatever reason they hadn't thought of it, now that they've seen Google do it, like, sure, it would be surprising to me if they didn't do it themselves. Like, it just feels like a good thing to do.
Yeah, I agree.
So, I mean, I feel like I know the answer to this. Would you recommend the Echo now? Would that be the device that you would recommend over maybe the Home?
Yeah, unless there's a really particular reason that you want the Google Home. Right now, it seems like the Echo's definitely ahead. Certainly in smart home control things, I think it's still definitely the undisputed winner. The only things I will say, and I mentioned this briefly in the story I wrote on Six Colors about this, I actually think that Google's probably done it slightly better than Amazon in terms of aesthetic design. Uh-huh. I think the Google Home is very nice looking. It feels less obtrusive to me in terms of, like, It's kind of nondescript. It's sitting down there. I know there have been plenty of people who compared it to an air freshener. Yeah, kind of looks like an air freshener.
It does.
But I think it's shorter and squatter than the Echo, and it looks less gadgety. It's got those swappable bases that you can change the colors on, but like with the default gray one, it's pretty unobtrusive. It doesn't really catch the eye. There are no buttons on top. The lights are underneath the plastic, so they don't show up at all unless you say the trigger word. And it's really, I think it blends in very well in a way that the Echo is a nice piece of, it's made nicely, it feels nice, but it's also very obviously this big monolith that's sitting there. And so if you have that sitting in a room, it draws the eye, right? It looks like this big wacky gadget thing. And I think that Google has definitely taken a little more time to think about the design and how it fits into the home. And so again, there are people for whom that will make a difference, and they want something that doesn't look as obviously techie sitting around. And so that's another reason I think that the Google Home might be compelling to some people when a place where the Echo isn't. But for my money, I definitely still use the Echo a lot more than the Home. Maybe one of these moments I should unplug it and see how far I can get with the Google Home before I get frustrated.
Do you think that would change if Apple were to build a canister?
I'm super interested to see what that would look like. My current feeling based on where Siri is right now is I'm not very optimistic about it because I don't feel that Siri does a good job. That said, when you're designing for a canister type product of, that's purely voice interaction, I think that they obviously would have to take different design decisions into account because it wouldn't just be like, oh yeah, I've done a Google search. Check your phone, right? Like that would be an automatic fail. So I'm curious to see if they decide to enter that market, what that would look like. I don't have the biggest hope for it, but I would certainly, because I clearly have a problem, I would certainly buy it and try it out and see how it compares to the other competitors in that field. And I certainly think the big advantage there would be the Apple ecosystem, right? Like it can play with all your other devices. If you have Apple Music, it will work with that. I'm sure they would make it look nice. I'm sure it would have good sound. And there's advantages in there, right? There's niches in that market for them to get into. But this Siri, there's a lot of arguments going back and forth about, oh, yeah, people ding Siri, but it's actually pretty good. My feeling is, no, I actually feel like it's good at some things, but the number of things that it's good at pales in comparison to any of these other things. And I know Phil Schiller just said a thing the other day about it's still the best thing because you've got the voice assistant you have with you. And it's like, I don't think that many people use it when they're on the go. I think it makes sense to have in the house because if you're wandering around and want to talk aloud, you don't look like a crazy person. And if you're on the street trying to use Siri to do a bunch of stuff like, I don't know, I'll talk to people about AirPods and how much they use Siri on their AirPods. But I feel like there's a higher stigma attached. There's a higher barrier to get people to do that. Whereas in the privacy of their own homes, people feel perfectly comfortable doing something stupid like talking to a computer.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair, and I agree that Apple's service would need to make progress. So just sticking it in a canister is not enough to make a super compelling product at this point. At least for those of us who have gotten used to what Amazon and others are doing. So I guess we'll see. For me, I think the end of this conversation is that all of these products can be better, like as good as the Echo is and as Amazon services are, as flexible as Google's, potentially could be. There, it's still early days, right? And I don't think Apple's missed the boat yet, but I would expect if they enter the market for them to make a big push in improving their service. And that's something that it's weird for Apple because they've been doing it longer, right? That Siri has been around for years and years now. And Amazon is new to the game, but they started from a very different place, and I think there's room for all of them to improve and change. So I don't think this is done yet. I think this is sort of the first round, and as these things improve, and as Amazon and Google introduce new things their canisters can do, and then ultimately new hardware, like the Echo is probably due for a hardware update at some point. Mm-hmm. That stuff will change and evolve, and I think the ground may shift a little bit.
There was one loose end that I didn't cover, Dan. It was a question that I wanted to ask before we kind of move on. It was about the integrations and the services. Because obviously, one of the things that makes the Echo line great is that they have all of the skills. And my understanding is Google are working on this, but don't have stuff yet or have very limited. Is that right?
I haven't seen anything specifically, just looking at the Google app. I don't think there is like a open. It's kind of like the old Apple TV, and it's like, it seems like, Google's made some partnerships, obviously, with certain things. They do have a bridge in the because there is some IFTTT access, so you can control some things that are not directly controllable. But if anybody's used that on the Echo, you found that that's often a subpar experience to the direct integration skills. Right now, I don't think there is anything. I'm just looking. I don't think there's anything that's actually available, beyond the stuff that's like the Play Netflix thing I just mentioned, which is clearly Netflix had to do something in order for that to work, or maybe that's all Chromecast. I'm not actually sure. But it's certainly not the open development community that we're used to from, say, iOS. The Echo has thousands of skills, I think, available now. It's kind of ridiculous. A lot of them are silly, but, it obviously, people are actively building stuff for it. I'm sure Google will do that. I'm sure they will. There's no reason for them not to, and it unlocks the ability to a lot more things. So, and Google has no problem making partnerships with other companies or having a developer ecosystem. They know how to do all of that. So I think that's just a matter of time.
All right, this week's episode is also brought to you by Blue Apron. Blue Apron's mission is to make incredible home cooking accessible to everyone while supporting a more sustainable food system, setting the highest standards for ingredients, and building a community of home chefs. For less than $10 a meal, Blue Apron will deliver to you seasonal recipes, along with all of the fresh, high-quality ingredients that you're going to need to make delicious home-cooked meals. They send you these great recipe cards that have great pictures on them, and they really go into detail about how you can make the food, so you'll not only be cooking these great meals in less than 40 minutes, you'll also be learning some skills about cooking on your own as well, which will be great, and then you can get to keep the cards, and maybe if there's a recipe that you really like, you can make it again for yourself. But the ingredients that you need for every one of your recipes, you get sent to you in these boxes, which are fantastic. And you just get what you need. So you're not going to have a ton of waste. You don't have to worry about, I have this ingredient or that ingredient. They send you all of it. And it's all pre-proportioned. It all comes in these little bags. So it's all super simple. You're not going to get things mixed up. It's just a really easy way to have to deal with a ton of the mess that comes with trying to make a meal. You don't have to go to the grocery store to pick up the specific ingredient that you need that you'd forgotten, even though you're halfway through the recipe. You don't have to worry about any of that because Blue Apron get you all of it. You can customize your recipes each week based on your dietary preferences, and you choose a delivery option that fits your needs. There's no weekly commitment, so you only get the deliveries when you want them, and Blue Apron delivers to 99% of the continental United States. So if you have some types of foods that you don't like to eat, or, there's some foods you don't want to eat, you get a big selection of meals that you can pick from. So for example, just from the recipes available right now, you could choose mushroom and chipotle pepper enchiladas with lime sour cream, potato and broccoli samosas with coconut, lentils, and yogurt sauce, or creamy shrimp spaghetti with broccoli and mayo lemon. They're just some of the many, many recipes that you can check out over at Blue Apron. Blue Apron knows that when you cook with fresh ingredients and support a more sustainable food system, you can make incredible meals, and this is why they set the highest quality standards for the suppliers and fisheries and farms and ranchers that they work with to make sure the food that you're putting in front of yourself, in front of your family, is of the highest quality. So, go and check out this week's menu and get 3 meals for free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/connected. That is 3 meals for free, and you don't even pay shipping on them. Blueapron.com/connected. This is a no-brainer to try out. You're going to love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals at Blue Apron. So don't wait. Go to blueapron.com/connected, and we thank Blue Apron for their support of this show and Relay FM. Blue Apron, a better way to cook. Stephen, take us down memory lane.
That's what I do best.
Yes, what you're known for.
So I wrote a thing on Mac Stories this week about the Mac Mini, looking back at the original introduction of that G4 machine, and then the move to Intel, and then the new body style. And it was really a machine that was built to lure switchers to the platform. Remember, Apple had the switchers ad campaign, which had a lot of funny videos in it. This was after that, but it was $499. It was the cheapest Mac ever made. This is the lowest cost Mac to date, far lower than anything else that was available at the time, or even historically. And to do so, this was the G5 era. They put a G4 in it. They put a combo drive in it. It was lower spec, but it was still a plenty powerful computer to run things like iLife and iWork, and those applications that really defined that decade. And because it was only $500, you could just basically plug in all your PC stuff to it, that your display and keyboard and mouse, and be up and running on a Mac very easily. You didn't have to replace the rest of your setup. And over time, I think the Mac Mini strayed from that a little bit. I think it was a successful machine in the regards of bringing people to the Mac for the first time, but people started putting them in entertainment centers and started running them as servers and putting them in cars, which was like this whole interesting subculture of nerds there for a minute that maybe Dan remembers. I remember very distinctly someone, I think it was in a DeLorean, put a projector and like because the hoods open from the front, they're hinged at the front, so you could like prop the screen up and pop the hood and have a screen on it, all sorts of crazy stuff. Anyways, slowly Apple evolved the Mac Mini, I think, to better reflect that. So they're adding things like Front Row, which was basically like the first gen Apple TV interface with the remote. It ran on iMacs as well and MacBooks and stuff, to control your music and TV shows and stuff from across the room. Adding things like HDMI to it once they kind of reformed it with a unibody case. They even had a server version. So in writing this, I'd forgotten the 2009 server existed. So it's like the original case, but no optical drive and 2 hard drives. So I just have a screenshot of that because I couldn't find one in time for my deadline. But
did that crush you?
It definitely hurt my heart a little bit. I told Federico, I was like, my photos are going to be incomplete, and he told me to grow up. So
he's like, I really don't care.
yeah. He's like, oh, okay.
There was also a moment when looking through the pictures where I was like, oh no, he's included the same photo twice. But then you go into detail to explain the minuscule difference between the one of the Mac Mini models and another one, because it had an IR port, I assume, for front row, right?
No.
For front row. So, Apple slowly changed the Mac Mini and has evolved it right up until 2014 when they ruined it. And the
why don't you say how you really feel, buddy?
Yeah, I took the gloves off in this. So the unibody design had a very simple plastic bottom. You could just like twist it and have access to the RAM. And even though it wasn't user serviceable, it was pretty easy to replace the hard drive. The 2011, 2012 machines, you could add a second hard drive if you wanted to. Again, you had to like get in there and kind of have tools and stuff. It wasn't like clip it in and go, but it was doable. In 2014, they left the door, but instead of seeing your memory, it's just a sheet of metal. Like, I don't even know why the door comes off anymore. It's really insulting, honestly.
So you can hide things in there. It's like a little secret place for some.
Oh, like one of those books when you carve out a book and you put like a gun in it. I mean, I hear people do that.
Wow,
that's a thing.
Don't hang out at Dan's house.
those voice assistants are. I'm starting to hear them even when they're not on.
They also got rid. And this is pretty well known. They got rid of the quad core model. The 2014s are all dual core, so not as powerful. And they got the price back down to $499 for the 2014 models, but they could have left the other stuff in place, or at least had it as a build-to-order option. So a lot of people, including me, have old Mac Minis. So I have one at home that we use in our entertainment center. We have an Apple TV, but the Mac Mini is plugged into the television as well, for mostly for DVD playback for the kids, but also if we need to watch something that the Apple TV doesn't have accessible. And it is the iTunes server through a Drobo and like file serving and stuff in the house. And then the second one is a quad-core model that Relay FM owns, that is at Mac Stadium, that if you are listening live right now in our app or on the web, you're hearing me via that Mini. That Mini runs open source software called Icecast that is our streaming server. And both machines have SSDs, both have as much RAM as you would take. The one at home actually have more RAM than Apple says it will support, and it totally works fine. But they're 6 years old. And like, I have two like critical machines in my life that are 6 years old that they still run Sierra, but at some point, they're not going to run the newest Mac OS. And that's kind of a bummer because I don't want a new Mac Mini that they sell now. A, it's not new anymore, and B, it's worse. And so it's really frustrating. And I was curious about the two of y'all. I know, Mike, you had a Mac Mini for a long time, but kind of what your experience with this computer has been, and how you feel about it now.
I ran a Mac Mini for years. When I kind of was started my podcasting career, I was doing it all on an 11-inch MacBook Air, and then I moved to a Mac Mini. Because what I ideally wanted to do was just to have one monitor that I could use for my Mac and for my games console at the time. So I was able to do that with a Mac Mini. I then went from that Mac Mini to a Mac Pro. Oh, that Mac Pro. Which was a bane of my existence before I moved to the iMac. But the Mac Mini lasted for a long time. It had a spinning hard drive in it. That thing got me through some serious times, it was a really good machine. Like Relay FM was started on that Mac Mini, believe it or not. I had a MacBook Pro that I had as well, but all of the recording happened on the Mini. The Mini was a separate device that I used just as a production machine. It worked really well. I mean, those things are workhorses, and it is a shame to see them at a place now where they are kind of falling by the wayside. Well, not kind of, they have. But I feel like the Mac Mini has always been like that. Like, for as long as I can remember it, like, it is a product that has always just had, like, life snatched from the jaws of death. Like, it feels like it's just about to go. Like, it is older than it's ever been, and they're like, here's a new one. Even though, maybe it takes away the user serviceable parts that Stephen desires.
It's not just me. So the mid-27 model, or the mid-2007 model was on sale for like 19 months. And I remember articles at the time of like, the Mac Mini's dead, like it's going away. And then the 2012 one was for sale for almost 2 years. And again, people said, it's almost dead, it's going away. The same thing happened to the Mac Pro, right? Before the 2012 model, maybe, there was a big gap. But now the Mac Pro is longer than the previous longest gap, and the same thing with the Mac Mini, that there have been big quiet periods in its life, but we're now in the biggest one. So yeah, I mean, you're right, and I think you saying, hey, I use it as a production machine. I started my business on it. Like, that really proves the flexibility of this computer. That you can buy the cheap one, and if you just need the cheapest Mac or just a really basic computer for a family member, buy the cheap one. Put it in their office and it's going to be fine. But if you upgrade the RAM or put an SSD in it, or, even if you don't, you can hook a bunch of stuff up to it, and it's a really powerful system. I went and opted for an iMac when I built my office, but, had the Mac, had the budget not been what it was, and had the Mac Mini been something that I was interested in, I could have done that. I could have gotten a loaded Mac Mini and an external display, and probably would have been fine, for the vast majority of my work. It really scales nicely, and that's kind of what I want them to return to. But Dan, if I remember correctly, you're on an iMac at home, right? You're not using a Mac Mini?
I do have a Mac Mini, actually, in addition to my iMac.
Secret Mac Mini.
It's not secret.
It's hidden inside of a hollowed out iMac.
Which is itself in a classic Mac that I've turned into an aquarium. I have a one hooked up to my TV. I have for many years. That's the second one. It is. I was just looking it up because I was curious, trying to remember what era it was. It is late 2012. So no optical drive, but you can upgrade the RAM. It's the second one. The first one was one of the early, I don't remember if it was a Core Duo or a Core Solo. I think it's a Core Duo. It was a leftover from one of the Macworld labs, and that was sort of my first attempt at that. And I pulled that one apart many times to do some upgrades with the old putty knife trick.
Oh yeah, it's
so
brutal.
That one it's terrifying every time you open that thing, and I think I bent several of the clips. The 2012 model I have also upgraded within the last year, following the iFixit guides. I put in an SSD and built my own Fusion drive, and that's a fun upgrade because the the hard drive brackets. So in that model, there's a hard drive bracket that will accept a second hard drive. Like there's just an empty space there. But in order to get to it, it's at the top of the machine. And since you access the machine through the bottom, you literally have to pull everything out of the case in order to get to it. And that's a little bit nerve-wracking at times because it means unscrewing and disconnecting a lot of little wires. And I know when Jason Snell did his, he broke the IR cable, which, not a big deal. Who uses the IR cable that much? I definitely had problems when putting it back together and trying to get things in the right order and plug things in the right places. And I had to nope, didn't quite do that right. And I had to take it apart and put it back together again. But I really love my Mac Mini. It is basically always on. It is connected to my TV. It hosts a Plex server. It runs OS X server, and I have a VPN or a setup on it, a VPN server. It's screen sharing accessible from anywhere. It's basically like my gateway computer. When I'm away and I need to get into my home network, I could sort of use that to get into my home network. It runs a lot of other tasks and servers that need to be always on. And I really like it. I love it as a computer. I agree that they really have crippled it over the years by taking out the ability to upgrade the RAM and by making the hard drive a lot harder to access. And yes, they've done this in order to make it smaller and slimmer and all that stuff. But, for the people who are buying Mac Minis, most of us, we like to have a little bit of customization. I love, upgrading from the HDMI to the HDMI port in the new model was a big draw for me because in the old one I had some crazy daisy chain to get from DVI. And there was some weird bug with my old Samsung TV where I actually needed to it needed to be translating it into analog and then back into digital or something insane, through a DVI to VGA, because otherwise the signal would come through crazy corrupted. And so I had this hilarious daisy chain of 3 adapters to plug it into my TV.
Yikes.
And that was back when I was actually watching stuff on the Mac Mini rather than just using the Mac Mini as a server, because now there's a Plex app for the Apple TV, so I can do that from there. But it's also my canonical server storage, so Photos is on there and downloads all of the originals of my everything from my photos, the iCloud photo library. My entire iTunes library is hosted on there because that's my backup. Old files I archive there. So it's it is my machine in the house where it's I could, if my iMac exploded tomorrow, that would inconvenience me, but it wouldn't be I've lost all my data. If the Mac Mini exploded, I mean, obviously it's backed up in a number of places, but that is a important computer for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and looking forward, it would be great. I have 2 thoughts. It would be great for Apple to take the Mac Mini and to reinvent it. And the design that we have today was based around the optical drive, which lasted exactly 1 generation in the new case, and then they removed it. So it is the size that it is because of the optical drive. And it's not even using, if you get an SSD one or a Fusion drive, it's using the PCIe storage. It's imaginable to see a future machine that is much smaller and, runs even cooler and, you can put under a TV and no one would ever notice, an Apple TV sized Mac.
Yeah. Sure.
That'd be really interesting. But what I really want is for them to kind of return it to the glory days of the 2011, 2012 Mac Minis. Even if you're going to keep the same design, it's silly, but if that's the trade-off, keep the same design, give us quad-core options, give us the ability to upgrade the RAM, and a lot of that would not be possible if they shrink it down to a MacBook-style system. So I'm fine with it being the size that it is, but restore the functionality that so many people wanted. That if you want to buy a bone stock $500 Mac, it's cheap, it's great, it gets the job done. But if you want to spend more money or you need more power, then give those people the option too. And you can have it both ways because Apple had it for both ways for years. It's not new ground, right? All I'm asking is to go back to the ground that we were on, and there's no need to make it thin. There's no need to trade out all the ports for USB-C, although I'm sure they would do that. Leave HDMI, leave these other things so you can use it in an entertainment center. But I'm just nervous about it.
And we call it the new Mac Pro.
Yeah, I mean, there's that angle too, right? If the 2 headless desktop Macs condense into one machine, I think that would be harder to serve both markets. You can't serve the $500 Mac market and the Pro market in one box. unless it's something totally different from the Mac Mini and the Mac Pro as we know today. But it's also, I guess that's also an alternative, right? That they have sort of one system that's really flexible and really wide-ranging. But that just doesn't seem like the Apple we know today.
Yeah, it seems unlikely. I mean, the same things people are saying about the Mac Pro, right? They apply to the Mac Mini as well. And the question is, are those of us who feel strongly about that enough of a voice to make Apple change its tune? And a large part of me thinks, well, maybe not. But at the same time, the Mac is a lot smaller market than the iPhone. And there are a lot of people in the Mac market who do crave some sort of machine that is more easily tinkerable. And if the Mac Mini is indeed only a portion of that market, like, once again, I feel like your percentage gets louder and louder as you shrink the audience of the product. And so I feel like for the Pro especially, which is obviously, I think tends to be a fairly small audience, obviously, that's more appealing to have a device that fits the needs of that voice, of that slice of the audience, because they are a larger and larger voice. So for the Mini, I'm a big fan of it. I don't know what will happen when I don't think mine's even running Sierra yet, because it's always the last computer that I upgrade. Because it's so critical to a lot of stuff in the house. And so, eventually there will come a time where it doesn't run the newest operating system. And yeah, I guess I'll have to make some choices at that point as to whether or not it is, needs to be retired. I mean, a lot of the stuff that it does could be done by an NAS. That's a possibility, but some of the stuff cannot be duplicated by that. And so you see some of the interesting concepts too. There's an article I read a few weeks ago about Intel making these tiny, tiny computers that are essentially upgradable by. They kind of do what Apple did with the Apple Watch, in that with the S1, where it's like all in one module. And so Intel has been like talking about these computers that are essentially, you can just swap out a module and like get new guts for the computer. And it's like, well, there's something interesting in ideas like that, but clearly you can make a computer that is very, very small. So there's an interesting application in that. It might not be what everybody in the Mac Mini wants, but it might have some advantages for some of those, some people who are looking for those things. So are there multiple products here? I don't know, but I'm not holding out hope that it's going to survive much longer along with the Mac Pro, and we might see those both die off within the next couple of years, or Apple might surprise us, as it seems to constantly do, and be like, you know what, we do have new versions. Here you go.
What do you think Apple sell more of, the Mac Pro or the Mac Mini?
Mini's cheaper. I would think they sell more just by volume.
I would think Mini as well. And Pro users know that the Mac Pro is not a good machine. Like people switching to the Mac.
No one's buying it now.
Yeah, or just needing a cheap computer. Don't know or care the Mac Mini is just as old. So
I'm sure the iMac outsell both of them put together.
Sure.
Oh, yeah. And they're all, whatever it is, 10, 15% of the overall Mac market, where everyone's buying MacBooks and MacBook Pros and MacBook Airs.
Mac Mini, man.
Rest in peace, buddy.
You keep keeping on, Stephen. Go find that one that you're looking for.
Yeah.
When they come for his Mac Minis, he'll be in a fort that he's built out of them.
It's a tiny, adorable fort.
Dan Moren, thank you so much for joining us today and filling in for Federico, who is on vacation. We're expecting Federico to come back next week. Who knows? He may stay on vacation. Dan, where can people find you? Where can they get in touch? Where can they engage with the Moren brand?
Oh, the brand. The brand is big. The brand is getting bigger. I am at DMoren on Twitter. I'm, of course, writing over at Six Colors and weekly at Macworld. I'm on Clockwise here on this Firefine network, also on the Rebound Tech Podcast with John Moltz, Lex Friedman, The Incomparable, tons of other places. My personal website's dmoren.com. I'll pimp my first novel comes out in a few months.
Woo.
Pimping that. So keep
Where
your eyes
people
open.
find out more about that?
Right now, my website's probably the best place. There'll probably be more stuff coming down the pike in the next month or so as that all gets squared away. But yeah, follow me on Twitter too, and you'll get the latest straight from the horse's mouth.
All right, if you want to find Stephen online, you can go to firetopixels.net, and of course he writes his monthly column for Federico over at Mac Stories as well, which is where you can find things about old computers. That's the place where Stephen writes stuff about old computers. So you get old computer coverage in a bunch of different places. It's interesting old computer coverage. There's also old computer coverage on Stephen's YouTube channel as well, which is 512 pixels. You can find Stephen online where he talks about new computers over on Twitter. He's at ISMH. I am at iMyke, IMYKE, and I mostly talk nonsense. So if you want to go to Twitter and follow me there, you can. Thanks again to our sponsors this week, the fine folk over at Eero, the lovely people at Encapsula, and the fine ladies and gentlemen at Blue Apron. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next time. Until then, say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye.
Adios.